So I finished the expanded summer pockets. I'm kind of conflicted on it. On one hand, it's a rare instance where I can get a VN that makes me feel something akin to what other readers supposedly feel about the high school setting. It's been a while, and throughout a good portion of the VN, my only feeling was basically, oh shit, summer vacation ruled. Where you can just walk to the park and befriend some random ass kids and play soccer there. And then, every other day there, over there, or you just join up again, it's fine. Where you can just go to the library and find new friends there. And it's been rare these days, but there has been times where I remember them. And it's like, oh, I wonder how they're doing. On the other hand, there's a lot more going on, and that eventually becomes the main focal point. And I'd rather just stay and have my own form of summer vacation nostalgia again. But they have to do what they want to do. It's key, they have to do it. And it's kind of ironic and on point if you finish it all, but to be fair, what I'm iffy about was part of the original VN anyway. Also, there's going to be spoilers around, but I'm going to put a little timestamp on it, you'll know what it is. So the route order isn't really important. In the original, you're supposed to have Ao as the 4th route, and the rest could be whatever, but now since there's 8 routes before the couple true route, the order could be in a couple different places. The main thing is like, oh, Umi gets locked out after the 4th route, so you should finish it beforehand. I heard some people like, no, you should read it after the true route, and I don't agree with them. The other one's is like, oh, doing Shizuku before Sumigi makes one of the last scenes less impactful. And then Miki should be done after Ao because it's the same kind of thing. And I guess Shiki should be done at the end as like the 8th route, but even then I did it 7th. Everything else is like a mishmash. Like for me, I would say Shirone should be the first one, but other people are like, oh, no, let's do Sumigi or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but that's how it is. If you really cared about it, this is the order I played, and this is the order that probably how you should play it. There isn't much of a common route, it just pieces sectioned off for every character, but that's pretty much what summer was to begin with. Like, unless you had some practice for a team, you can just do whatever you want. Sometimes you wanted to play ping pong, sometimes you want to go fishing, and other times you just walked into weird coincidences down the street. My favorite route was Kamome, with Shiki being right up her ass. Honestly, Shiki's done better, but it's just not the same feeling that it got from Kamome. And I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong or whatever, I just don't care. Miki and Shizuki's route were kind of average to me, but they both ended strongly. Like, Miki's route started running at like the 3/4 mark, which kind of sucks usually, but it's like, hey, it ended strong, it's fine, right? Though I guess Sumugi was kind of the same way as well, so I don't know. Except that hers had a more relatable summer feeling to it anyway, so I guess Sumugi's better in that point. Outside of that, I had the most fun when it wasn't really concentrating on a specific character. Like, a good example of that is, like, I don't really like Shirone at all. She's fine, but her drama was kind of middling, and she's part of the reason why the plot becomes convoluted to begin with. But a good chunk of her route was just having her and Harry hanging out with other random ass people on the island. He's having fun, she's having fun, we're all having fun, and I really like that. A lot of the routes in VN just have this shit going on where, hey, you enter a route, every other character fucking disappears. But in this one, they're all still around, they're all having fun, it's great. I generally just had a really good time through it. I felt the route to be kind of a stagnating experience. It just lingers on for too long. It doesn't really hit the right amount of payback. Basically, I just didn't get the cathartic experience from it. You can understand what's going on, but it's still convoluted, and I'd rather go back and just read Kamomi's route again. And again, that's kind of ironic. I'll talk about that later. It's to the point that Kamome just feels like the odd one out of the original 4, where she could have been in a different VN and just about enjoying summer with like maybe 10 minutes worth of editing around. Mainly that I came in knowing nothing. I got the summer fever and I had a good ass time, and then I got kicked off and told that it's like, no, it's not about that, it's about this. Basically, it was cool, but I want my summer fever back. So you might have noticed that I didn't really talk about the characters themselves, and that's because they're relatively close to a one-note character as you can be for a huge chunk of their stay. Tenzin loves ping pong. Sure, he's a good person, athletic, and he has a thing for this other character, but 90% of the time, he's ping pong. Pretty much the same with Ryuichi, where he wants to be topless, and I think he wants to take off shorts off as well, but Miki keeps shooting him when he does. Sure, he's a cool dude and wants to help out whenever it's possible, alongside being like 100% fisherman. He can do whatever he wants on the sea, but 70% of his stuff is still, oh, I want to be topless. You'd probably never see Miki around much if it wasn't about Ryuichi taking off her shirt and she usually wants to shoot him. Otherwise, she's just a rule stickler. And you can pinpoint main quirk on most of these characters that will handle most of what they do. Like, I got pretty tired hearing Shizuku just trying to insert boobs in all her fucking conversations. And the routes don't generally explain the reasoning behind their quirks. but it's not like they explode with a lot more personality because of it. You just understand where they're coming from. And while I've just been shitting on them, a lot of this works overall. Like, since again, a good chunk of the end is just these characters hanging out with each other. The MC is still new, doesn't know anyone, they banter around, and it's funny. It just works. It's like befriending random people in the park again. You just play soccer. Sure, you don't know anything else about this guy. All you know is he likes soccer, you like soccer, you want to play soccer together. So in hindsight, it's like both of you are basically one-note characters to each other. It's kind of funny. There's also a couple mini games. There's this Mesu King thing that if you play Yakuza, you know what I'm talking about. That I didn't really invest much time into it. I beat it, but I safe scummed the tutorial fight, so I started in the top 10 instead of being like in 35 or 36, whatever it was. The ending was fine, but also I'm not sure if that's locked until you finish your route, or otherwise it just spoils parts of it, so I don't know. And then there was ping pong, where I spent a lot of time in, and to my surprise I found there was a ping pong tournament. I had a blast at that, except that most of the opponents had massive bullshit mechanics behind them. Especially Shizuku, where she blocks 2 or 3 points when she maxes her meter, and it's bullshit because you kind of have to play. It's like it's a ping pong thing, and the mechanics are very shallow, so you can't curve it, you can't shoot it on the sides, you just hit it, or at least that's what I assume. Otherwise, they didn't tell me how to play it, but whatever, right? But then there's Miki's finishing move, which is also bullshit, where you have like a half a second to figure out where she's going to hit. You can kind of cheese it where you pause the game a lot, but otherwise whatever. And then there's Umi, who's the most fucking bullshit, where she summons her monsters from the Mesu King stuff, and one does like direct damage to you, and it takes off like 1/4 your health or some bullshit. And so you can't block it, or at least I couldn't figure out a way to block it. Then there's one that's like, oh, this one blocks an attack, which is almost just as much bullshit as the other ones. The only one that can compete with Umi is probably Sumigi, where she isekais both you and your teammate if you're doing doubles, and you lose like 4 balls, almost losing the game. I think I missed the mechanic in the ping pong tournament thing, because there's this meter where it goes down, and once it all goes all the way down, you lose your paddle. And the thing is, like, even if you do all perfects halfway through the tournament, you're still losing more meter than all these other characters you're facing. It's like, what the fuck's going on? So I think there's like some kind of mechanic I just didn't understand. And it takes like 2 to 3 turns to get your paddle fucking back. It's to the point where you might as well just take the hits so you can go to critical health and then just one hit KO them. Like, sure, yeah, you can hit them back, but you lose like, I don't know, 5 to 10% of your health each time strike, and you're just gonna be doing that for a long time. You're just gonna lose more HP than just accepting the defeat. And it's kind of bullshit sometimes, where sometimes they lose their paddle and they get it back in 1 turn. It's like, what the fuck is this? Why do I have to wait so much longer? And it's because they time their shit to get the fever back up, and when you get fever, you get your paddle back immediately. So what you get from beating this whole thing is pretty wholesome. You get a small Tenzin route, and it's pretty funny how it goes through. Sadly, I don't think there's any kind of side route for Ryuchi. If there is, I missed it, and I think, oh damn, right? So all in all, I'm giving this an 8. I'm not super fond of the true route. It feels like it's retreading a few things that I'll cover in the spoilers. If you're someone that habitually drops but wants to experience the summer experience of it, then go for Shirone, Komome, and Shiki. And maybe Umi and Tsumigi, but that is like hit or miss kind of thing. I forgot to mention that my favorite character was Tenzin. Sure, in reality he'd be fucking annoying when he'd be constantly using ping pong as a reference for everything, but he can still keep up a conversation with the group, right? He's really enduring if you get past it, because he's still trying to help Haruhi when he's asking for it, even when he's not. Sometimes like, hey, let's just talk about it, and then lets him vent. He's basically a combo of Noda and Godon from Angel Beats. Also, Summer Pocket soundtrack has no way of beating Angel Beats soundtrack in terms of like variety, or even Little Busters, I guess, but it holds its own, and Hourglass of Summer is probably a track I'd remember for a while. I guess the best way I can say it's like, oh, Summer Pockets is more concise. It's more thematic than anything else, so let's just go with that. So now as for the spoilers. So the main note before going through any of this is just my conjecture, and that's kind of obvious, but I also know some people get really mad. It's like, why'd you think that this was like, well, it's what I think it is. Fuck you, what the fuck do you think? So a lot happens, and also a lot seems kind of pointless at times, because there's 2 central themes in the VN and they're kind of fighting each other for the top spot. One is relearning how to enjoy your time, specifically summer vacation, taking it as a break, get refreshed, then go on with your life once more. And the other's about the butterflies and the magic shit that's happening on the island. What are they? How did they become, and what's their purpose? So how does it all coincide with the snippets of scenes that are happening between some of the routes? Some routes handle the first theme, the others handle the second, and for the people that really enjoy the second will love the true route. The others that enjoyed more of the simple approach of just, hey, we're having fun in summer, will be disappointed with the true route because it's not about that at all. Even though they're kind of forcefully conjoined by the end. Because the first theme kind of changes from having a break and going back for round 2 to a scenario, but this is the best experience I've had and I never want to go back there. Fuck that, right? Shizuku's route actually handles that really well, even though I wasn't really too keen into route overall. The characters knew if they kept on going on the path they were set, it hit this degraded scenario, so they do a quick cut to go around it. Like Heidi goes to the island as a way to run away from his problems. Mainly they had an episode and fucked up in his swimming meet and his life spiraled out of control. He's not afraid of swimming in some kind of inconsistent level of fear of larger bodies of water. And you'd think that's something to be considered in the grand scale of the VN, but not really. It's important for the contained route and the red herring along the way, but otherwise you can just ignore it. And I'll get back to that later on. So the true route is convoluted, like I said before. Shirone gets visions of what will happen in the future to specific people, and they're pretty much always bad news. Part of it is in her route. Basically, she thinks as long as she doesn't interact with anybody, then visions will show up and nothing will happen to the other people. But really, it's just the future selves shooting this knowledge back into the past. I think there's something that makes it so that the opposite works as well, where she goes into the future, but I think that's based on becoming a butterfly instead and just existing until that point in time happens. Anyways, this is pretty important overall because the whole family is spamming the shit out of it. So the short of it all, with a lot of skipping scenes, Shirone only has her grandpa, her dad died, and her mom just disappeared. Shirone figures out her power to find them, and that fucks her over since now all the future events are set in stone. Really what the mom was doing was trying to make Shirone not activate her power, and that's probably because she goes further up in time and knows that Shirone dies during Umi's birth. And that's what fucks her up and she becomes a butterfly, or Shirone mom's becomes a butterfly, right? So before that she contacts Kyoko, and I guess Kyoko contacts her mom, right? But to handle a shed of random shit belonging to a lot of people to be used as like an anchor point for all these things to come. This is somewhat important, but I'll get back to it. It's like some large ass loop where Shirone is dead because giving birth to Umi. Heidi is a shitty ass parent, but at least he's not kind of around and pays her shit, so he's like almost, but not as bad. So Heidi goes back to the island for Shirine's 10 years, that funeral thing, right? And leaves Umi behind in the house. He does this for the same reason as Kobato, which is the grandpa, basically they think it's like, oh, if they get too close, they want to experience the past, and it procs her power, and it fucks up her life because of that. Well, it sucks to be him because she does that anyway, and now she's looping the same summer so she can get to know Shirone and stuff like that. She's not really into Heidi at first since the dad version is kind of garbo, but she warms up to him pretty quickly. Or at least from what she said, like, it came to the point where I think Umi's route happened before the VN even started. And that's why he's already having deja vu in the prologue, and it might mean that the Takahara family also has some kind of power since he does kind of do a crazy amount of shit throughout the routes that should have killed him. So Heidi's technically more OP than the rest of the group, but I think it's more of a lineage thing. It's the only reason why Umi didn't nuke herself in one turn because of it. I think it ties in when there's where she's supporting one of the island pocket domains and Kyoko handles the semi one with the anchor shed shit, or at least that's what I thought about. Anyways, the gist is that Umi keeps looping back, and if Heidi hits Shirone's route, then Shirone loops back to have the chance to see Umi again. And if it doesn't work out, then Shirone's mom loops as well to try to proc Shirone's power away, basically looping until what's set in stone actually changes. And it's not really set in stone, it's just Shirone just doesn't care. She could have married someone else and not like birth Umi, maybe that would have worked, but no, she wants to see Umi, so that's how it is. So after Umi gets her summer and everything she wanted, she goes back even further back in time to stop Shirone from ever getting her power. And that part was kind of weird since you assume the new character is Umi, but in the beginning of the route she says she barred her power. So it made it seem like, oh, maybe it is Heidi, and she also scared of like getting to the boat because the large bodies of water. It's like, hey, it's Heidi again, and it's like, no, it's Umi. So from what I recall, Umi doesn't have that phobia, so it's like a red herring thing, but where the bar power was just the amalgamation of like butterflies instead of like, oh, this is the family power we have. So she might be a mix of a lot of people, with just Umi being the top personality. Shirone doesn't get her powers, so the future's no longer set in stone, and somehow that helps almost everybody in the main cast, which is bullshit. Kamome is fine, Ai is fine, Tsumugi is fine. It's just one of those things where they all just wrapped everything up for the sake of doing it and didn't really care about it. It feels like it's lacking a lot of conviction that a lot of the other titles had. So Heidi shows up in the last iteration again, but also without any baggage this time around, and finally gets allowed to clean the shed. He's offered to keep one thing from the shed, and since Kyoko is just chucking everything away now, and he picks up the rainbow colored paper plane thing, and that was something that he and Shirone made for Umi. And so I was like, oh, that represents Umi. So now she's back with the help of Shiki, and that's the part where I stopped understanding Wender's point in the whole plot. I'd assume it'd be Wenders that would be helping him out, but nope. In my mind, things were going to be handled somewhat differently, where Shirone's mom sees that Shirone will die, so she talks with Kyoko, and because she's overusing her own power, she turns into this butterfly and goes back in time and gives her own memories back to herself so she can scan the future again, and she keeps on doing that. And then back in further past, Wenders and Heidi's grandma are friends, and I thought while Wenders ran away into the pocket, the grandma basically anchored it so now Wenders could come back whenever she wanted to. Fast forward back to younger Kyoko, Shirone's mom talks about, which I think her name's Hitomi, but whatever, talks about what's going on. Kyoko asks her mom about setting up the anchor. She laughs because she already has the fucking anchor set up already, and just goes back to Wenders like, hey, can you keep it up for a bit? Keep in mind that time isn't linear in there for some reason. Now back to the present with all the looping shit. Have it be the last loop. Umi saves the day. OG Wenders shows Umi the way out. Grandma's favors now complete. Wenders leaves and it's back to her own time. Thanks to the guy that she was into. I forgot his name. It doesn't really matter. Now Sumugi is actually a real kid. It could be like the grandkid of her kid. So I guess in Reflection Blue, everything is basically the same. The difference is Shiki's route is already done at this point, and Shiki takes over Wender's job and guides Umi instead. Maybe because of this, when Heidi dies, maybe he gets to reunite with with Shiki. And I'm thinking this, but like, oh, well, I redid Shiki's route to see if anything changes. Because in Little Busters, actually happens a lot with a lot of these characters, but nope, nothing happened. I also did Owl's route to see if anything changed in there, because there's one scene where Heidi touches his butterfly, and it gives him all these memories about like, oh, this dad's really depressed and suicidal because his wife and kid died. And considering this is key and subtlety is hit or miss for them, I assumed that was going to be the true route. I guess it was more subtle than Little Busters at least. And I guess if you consider, oh, Umi went back in time, therefore she's gone, Heidi probably thinks both of them died at this point, and maybe that is his memories, but who knows? That's what I assume, that's how it is. But in the end, there was nothing new in the route to handle it. And I guess that all this makes sense because, like, well, these routes shouldn't happen anymore because the loop is done. In the end, Heidi is with Shirone at this point. Other notes I had was that Sumugi's route was pretty whatever until the last 10% of it, where it makes the rest of the route pretty good. And this is something Key actually does really well, where you can have like a mediocre type of route, but retroactively it makes everything better when you hit the ending. Shiku's route isn't on the summer side of routes, so it basically could have been put in a different VN. The ending was still impactful, but only if you did Sumugi's route first. And at that point, my favorite part of Shizuku's route was basically just being hard carried by a different character, so that kind of sucks for them, right? Umi's a mixed bag. It takes a little for it to start, but most of it's comical. I liked it a lot. I think a lot of her enjoyment is based on where you are in life. So if you're really young or you just hate children or whatever, you might not like it. But otherwise, like, hey, this is fun. This is like hanging out with one of your siblings. And yeah, it is just really cute and it becomes a good time. Though there is a good chunk where it felt like it was just padding for time, because I think Umi's route is the shortest route of the bunch. But it's still a good way to bridge the normal summer pockets to the true route. To be honest, I think I'd rather have the reader be forced to read her route before the first change that happens after the fourth route, instead of just completely missing it, or optionally missing it, right? Mickey's ending was fucking great, but only if you're really into family and bonds as well, which if you're into Key, you're probably into that, because Key loves doing that. A lot of summer pockets felt like they were trying their own thing, but also trying to redo a few routes from like previous titles. You get a huge amount of air vibes in the beginning and also some Clannad vibes sprinkled in. All in all, had a lot of fun this VN. Part of me wishes I stopped earlier on because I got what I wanted instead of just them trying to be Key once again. Sometimes something simple is all I really need. The concept behind all of it is still pretty neat, albeit kind of convoluted again compared to some of the other titles they had. I'm giving it 8, but honestly sometimes I feel like it should be a 7. If it was specifically just the common route, all the hijinks that you can do between them, and then Kamomi's route, I'd probably give this a 9.